Hello, welcome to the show. This is Emotional Badass, where Moxie meets mindful. I'm your host, Nikki Eisenhower, life coach and psychotherapist. And on today's episode, I'm discussing attention, intention, and stress management for the body. Hello, y'all. Now, this is a simple concept, but this can be profound for our bodies. Modern life seems to have a hamster wheel quality. Do you notice that? A go, 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 go sort of energy. If you're healing from a dysfunctional childhood, this modern, hectic pace layers on top of your more frazzled or potentially hypervigilant or anxious nervous system, body, and mind. There are everyday stressors, like a stress frequency, a weight to stress that our bodies pick up. If we're highly sensitive, we are 15 to 20% of the population. It means 80 to 85% of the people that we get advice from that process in the world are very different than we are. So if we are highly sensitive, we are the sponges, y'all. We soak up these energies. We're spongier than the average person. These frequencies, these messages that carry a stressful weight, we pick these things up with ease. We soak them up, sometimes without even realizing it. For some of you, it may be the first time you're considering what you're soaking up hearing me say it right now. Whether we're trying to get on top of old dysfunction and heal, and or trying not to pile on to already stressed and tired minds and bodies, learning to release bodily tension is a skill of the thriving. And if you listen to this show, I know that you want to thrive. I suspect you're not dying to thrive, you're living to thrive. And thriving, in my opinion, is your birthright. Modern life pushes against this natural birthright to feel centered, grounded, even internally slowed down, productive, purposeful, generally good enough. We want to feel useful without feeling pressured, overwhelmed, desperate, or never good enough. What I have for you today are some questions to help you find and unlock and release this buildup of tension, this soaking up over the course of days or weeks, years, our whole lives. We can wring out this tension like one wrings out a wet, soppy sponge. It is not a little thing. It really, really helps how podcasting works, y'all. So please remember to find Emotional Badass wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to hit that subscribe and follow button to get more videos like this in your feed. It helps us get more guests, get bigger guests. It really, really helps. So thank you for that effort. Think about these words, intention and attention. Intention follows attention, and attention follows intention. Now, I'm not just throwing riddles at you. What does this mean? Well, we can't really deal with what we don't notice or acknowledge. We can't really change without intending to change, to guide ourselves typically away from something towards something. We can't do this if we don't bring attention to what we then intend. Questions help guide our noticing. So often when we're healing, so often when we're seekers and highly sensitive people, we want answers, right? We want answers to the little piddly stuff of today. We want big existential life-meaning answers. There's a whole lot of power in just allowing ourselves to ask the questions, even though a part of us may always want solid answers. Take a moment to think about food and hydration. Now, we manage at the individual level, we manage food and hydration needs all day long, every day. And we've been doing this since we were quite young. 2, 3, 4 years old, we can look up at someone and ask for something to eat, ask for water, something to drink. When we're very young and we're still diapered, we weren't developed enough to be able to pay attention to the feeling of needing to eliminate liquid or waste from our bodies, right? So we wore diapers until our bodies grew into themselves and we could feel our bodies better and actually grow into the responsibility of paying attention. Now, that's an important phrase to me. It's an intentional way that I'm saying that. Growing into the responsibility of paying attention and being able to give ourselves an intention to carry through. Anyone who has ever been tasked with being in charge of a toddler who's in the process of potty training, of getting out of those diapers, anybody who's ever done that for a moment or for an entire season for a child, anybody who's spent time with a potty training kiddo knows that if that toddler is having a good old time playing, if they're having fun, if they're engaged in an activity, that child may very much feel the sensation of needing to eliminate urine, but will override it to keep on playing. And if they keep overriding it and keep not listening to that cue from the body that says, hey, go find a bathroom, then that toddler is either going to wind up panicking and all of a sudden going, I need to potty now. And then it's a mad dash. It's a rush to try to find a toilet in time. Or that child will keep playing through. And we think of it as, oh, this kiddo had an accident. But that's not an accident. It's an intentional, willful choice to keep playing, to not be interrupted by this body and its needs because the head decided I would rather play. In that moment, play is more important than stopping to eliminate in the toilet, than stopping to listen to the cues of this body. When it comes to stress, I see a lot of highly sensitive adults with trauma histories or not, ignoring stress and trying to keep playing through their days. And just like that toddler, there's going to be a mess to clean up physically and emotionally, or there's going to be a mad scramble, some kind of anxious running around, if we don't direct ourselves to stop playing through, to stop and actually prioritize taking care of ourselves, to listen to the cues of this body, whether that's convenient or inconvenient, whether that means fun gets to keep going or that means fun stopping, whatever that means, whether that means going to the bathroom or wringing out the stress that we soak up over time. If we are to take care of ourselves as highly sensitive people, we must prioritize taking care of ourselves. And I know that that sounds like, well, big duh, Nikki. But this modern pacing gets us on this roller coaster, this train of energy. And just like that little child who is on that train track of play and doesn't want to get off that track to go tend to its body, we too do this with life. We do this with our stress. We get on a train, we get on a wavelength, we get on a track. And our human egos don't like having to stop and tend to this body, do they? If we did, it would be more natural for that child to stop play and delight in taking care of their body before coming back to the play and not trying to power through. Now, I'm going to use myself and my story as an example. Childhood trauma actually teaches a kid to pay more attention to the threat, which is typically the biggest, most powerful, usually the most upset and acting out, most dangerous, most reactive human being that is around them. This is out of a sense of survival. I have a brand new workshop going live this month, September 2024, mapping your recovery from narcissistic abuse. Whether you're healing from a narcissistic relationship or breaking free from the legacy of narcissistic parenting, this 2-hour interactive workshop will offer practical strategies to rebuild self-trust and move forward in your healing. The workshop is streamable on any device with lifetime access to the replay and will equip you with the tools to take care of yourself around any manipulation and embrace a future of strength and resilience. Come join me on Saturday, September 21st, 9 a.m. Mountain Time. Secure your spot today at emotionalbadass.com/workshops. Use code BADASS for 30% off, and patrons, come get your half price coupon now. I learned to be hyper aware of my mother because she was aggressive. She was flat out mean. She was violent. She would fly off the handle. If English is your second language, fly off the handle means that she would become enraged with little to no warning. I learned to pay attention to my mother out of a sense of survival. And I intended to keep myself safe through paying that attention to who was scary in my world, who was bigger and more powerful than me. I was hyper aware of my mother's energy. I learned very quickly, because I'm smart, right, to stay out of her way as self-protection. I also learned other skills, not just staying out of the way. I learned to be funny. I learned to be the family clown. I learned to insert jokes at exactly the right moment to try to disarm her, to try to keep her frustration low. I tried to manage how emotionally and physically out of control she was in her own adult body. I learned to pay attention to her out of this sense of survival, out of trying to manage what was chaotic and out of control in my world. The implications of this at the individual level are a really big deal. This is what childhood chaos, stress, dysfunction, trauma, this is what it does. It's not just the moments that you're getting hit. It's not just the moments that you're getting neglected, like left at school. It's not just the moments where you're being sexually abused. This has a very long arm into our adult lives because I learned to pay attention to her instead of learning to pay attention to me. This is the birth of codependency for so many of us. This is the birth of people pleasing. Because my mom was like a destructive tornado coming through, I learned how to specifically not pay attention to myself. What was I supposed to do? Pay attention to anxiety rising in my body when I was powerless to manage that inside of myself or manage her? Who can pay attention to themselves, their body, their mind, if they're at the window watching a tornado approach? It makes all the sense in the world that all of my intention, attention, and focus would be outside of myself on that human tornado coming at me. It's as if all of my paying attention energy was sent outward, none left for me. So I learned to not pay attention to myself out of a sense of survival. Take that concept even further. I learned to dissociate, to even leave myself. And that worked well for me to survive, because if my jokes, if my temperament, if my walking on eggshells couldn't disarm her rage or keep her stabilized from flying off the handle, then I very much could then leave my body. I could escape her in my mind, even when my body had to stay with her. She wasn't always physically hitting me, but she might as well have been. She'd spend minutes to hours berating me, screaming an inch or two from my face, her angry spittle hitting me. She'd poke me in the sternum, a place that even if I was in a bathing suit, you couldn't have seen the bruise of her little finger. I was not allowed to back up away from her in any way. And anyone who has had an aggressive, angry parent has had this moment, because it is almost as if an angry, out of control parent gets some kind of anger handbook. And one of those rules is you are never allowed to retreat. Retreating meant to me, I'm definitely going to get hit if I try to retreat, because she'd only escalate if I tried to escape her, because she was using me to process her rage, to get it out of her. Do you see what I mean about my birthright and how in my healing, I'm going to take back my birthright? My own mother took away my birthright to naturally back away from danger, to separate myself from what was aggressive and frightening me, what was hurting me, what was overwhelming me. She took away my birthright of my body knowing from birth to move away from an attack or to defend during an attack. She took that from me. This is what abuse teaches. And very few people will walk into a therapist's office and say, "Oh my goodness, please help me pay more attention to myself because I pay so much attention outwardly." This is a very hard thing for the typical survivor to put their finger on. And we wonder why people with a lot of abuse can sometimes seem clingy or avoidant. These are the underlying forces that trained that person away from their birthright to be connected, to speak up simply if something is wrong, to move away from aggression. While my mom was spanking me or grabbing my upper arms or throwing me into a corner where I'd be left to stay 5 to 10 times what would have been recommended at my age for any kind of proper timeout, I, like a good little girl, I learned to ignore my body. That's what was safest for me, was to ignore myself. It was like a flip-flop, a swap, a trade, that instead of growing up learning to pay attention to myself and take care of myself, it flip-flopped. And I paid attention to her wholly. And I learned to look like I was super okay while I was maximally overstimulated, terrified, and panicking. I learned to power through and appear like I was fine. Now, there is no doubt that life sometimes requires being able to power through. And there are lots of people out there who would disagree with me on that front. I just can't get around it. I can't see life any other way. I mean, here's a simple example that has nothing to do with trauma about how I've had to power through recently. I think I mentioned it here on the show a few months back that this past Memorial Day, after about a 5 to 6 mile hike, our car became stuck in the last little bit of spring snow. We live at almost 9,000 feet and we were higher than where we live in the Rocky Mountains, and there was some snow on the road and we got stuck in it. Now, we happen to just be about 5 to 7 miles, give or take, from our actual house. There's no calling a cab. There was no service. There was no calling a neighbor. There was no getting an Uber where we live. So we left our car, grabbed our packs, and we powered through. We walked up to our doorway. I was a runaway teenager at 17. I got myself into college with no help from parents. In my 20s, there were times that I worked 3 jobs at once while going to school full time. One year, I had 7 W-2 forms. I'd beg different jobs to let me work double shifts so that I could make ends meet. Powering through has in truth saved my life. I don't think it's a helpful message to tell a trauma survivor that they shouldn't have to plow through or that that's unfair. Saving ourselves, just like if a boat we were in flipped over in the water. Saving ourselves would be a powering through. It would be finding something to stay afloat and it would be trying to swim to land. There would be no available choice of not powering through. It would be power through or die. And when you're surviving deep childhood dysfunction, this is how it seems. This is how it feels. In a lot of ways, this is how it is. And that might make a lot of people very uncomfortable. They might not want that reality. They might think it's crueler for me to say that reality to you than to pretend like you shouldn't have to power through. All shoulds are irrational. Of course, no child should go hungry. No kid should have to survive. No child should endure neglect or abuse. Those shoulds don't make it so. Those of us who experience what most good-hearted people would hope we never ever had to, we survive it by powering through. I don't think anyone gets through the grief process of what is lost to be able to get to the other side of deep childhood trauma without at times powering through. And it's okay to be mad at the powering through. But we can't reasonably expect ourselves to continuously power through. We aren't machines. We're people. We're humans. Even our machines, our cell phones, must stop and get plugged in for a good long while to recharge and to work. For some of you out there, you may be hearing this and realizing for the first time just how much or how perpetually you've been powering through. Often I'll hear clients try to find the utopian solution here. And that usually sounds like a dream. Like, I just need 6 months or a year to take off of life to just heal. I get it, right? I have certainly toyed around with this thought, this idea. I have at times screamed at the sky, at the universe, wanting this utopian fantasy. It just makes someone struggling yearn for what they can't have. And that is a waste of time. It is a waste of energy. We can acknowledge this thought and then release it instead of pining over what most of us likely can't have. It's an unnecessary torture to put a lot of stock in this utopian dream. And it's not even really helpful. I can assure you, in my almost 20 years of helping people, that even when I've seen someone who had the independent wealth or the financial security or the family support to take 6 months or a year off of all real responsibilities and just do that deep dive healing, it doesn't happen the way that utopian fantasy plays out in our heads. Emotional healing doesn't work in some kind of utopian bubble. Emotional healing works when we work it while we live, not putting life on hold and then getting back to life. Now, there may be times in your life where you can or are forced into treatment, and that may very well take you out of life. I had an 11-day hospital stay in my early 20s. If this is where you're at, or if this is where you're going, just don't be fooled by it. That will be a time of rest, of regrouping, of creating a plan. And the real work will happen when you are tasked with real life responsibilities again. Even if that upsets you to hear from me, I hope there's a part of you that can tap into the truth of this. I'm a person that finds more peace in the truth of what I'm facing than somebody covering up part of the picture just because they're scared I'll have feelings. What I have for you today are some questions, some very simple questions to help you bring attention to your own self so that you can then be more intentional with your self-care. And I hope for those of you that it resonates with this way, that it'll help you put down the fantasy of wishing to escape real life to heal. Here is how you use the struggle every day to work with life, not try to create a life that hides from real adult responsibility. So all I want you to do right now before I give you the first question is take a really big breath and pay attention to your body. Notice yourself. That's the first question. What do you notice? So simple. And you can notice anything. You can notice that it's weird to stop and pay attention to yourself. It certainly was for me at first. My inner hypervigilant part was like, what are you doing? You better hypervigilantly pay attention to everything else other than you. This is dangerous. I had to work slowly with her. I had to help her understand in a myriad of ways why continuing hypervigilance was going to wear us out and put us in an early grave, one way or the other. I had to help her understand that she's not a robot and she must stop and rest and has to learn how to prioritize and value that too, not just hypervigilance. What do you notice about your body today? What I notice is a certain tightness or tension at the back of my neck, in my jaw. It can feel sometimes like my head is almost too heavy for my body, and I have a little head, y'all. I notice some tightness in my hips, my lower back. You may find that you notice that your in-breath or your out-breath has a little bit of restriction, one or both. You may notice your breath is shallow, like you breathe at the very top of your lungs instead of fully down into the cavity of your lungs. Deep down, low into your belly, like you're trying to breathe into your abdomen, into your diaphragm. You might feel a lot of tightness or tension in your body. You may notice the opposite, that maybe you feel more like a blob of jello with really poor posture. When we bring attention to your body, can you see how then we can form an intention about what we've noticed? If I notice that I breathe at the top of my lungs, very, very simple intention to breathe more fully and more deeply. What would you like to intend right here and right now based on what you notice? Would you be willing to do this as an experiment? Would you be willing to prioritize noticing yourself for the whole rest of today or this week? What would it be like to pay attention inwardly instead of outwardly, to balance that a little bit better? Are you willing to notice yourself? Are you willing to prioritize you? Are you willing to offer yourself simple intention, simple direction? Maybe to sit up taller. Maybe to smile more. I often give myself the intention to slow down internally. Now, if somebody is physically with me, they're not going to see any change necessarily from that intention, but it's for my insides. It's for my mind. It's for my body. It's for my inner child who felt way too much stress. It's a permission. It's an act of self-love. Maybe you can consider the importance of stopping throughout the day to check in with yourself and let go of what may feel today like maybe your normal tension that you've been carrying around for years and years. I don't want that to be normalized to you, to me, to anybody. In a way, what I'm pitching is an idea that you become your attentive parent, like an attentive mother might for a small child, noticing what is beyond that child to notice. If I'm babysitting a toddler and it's been an hour and a half, pushing 2 hours, and I know they've been drinking and hydrating, I'm going to notice for them. Hey, do you need the potty? I think I could use a potty break. Could you? And help them by bringing some awareness that now would be a good time to stop play and check in. Ask ourselves some questions, maybe go attend to ourselves. How do we learn these things now and today? These overly simple things that it's so easy for the average person to take for granted. This is where a lot of secret shame sits for a childhood trauma survivor. That they might be smart as a whip, might have an above average IQ. But then it might be really, really hard to just pay attention. Early in my healing, part of what I had to pay attention to was hydrating myself. I would pass out from being dehydrated. That's how far it can go to not pay attention to ourselves. The amount of survivors that I have met over my career cannot be counted who would tell me that they can't even pay enough attention to themselves to drink a reasonable amount of water in a day. Now, this might be someone with a very high-powered IT career. This might be someone who is a doctor. This might be a lawyer. Which only makes someone carry even more shame, more confusion, more embarrassment. I can do this. I can do all these hard things. I can have more education than most people across the entire planet, but I can't do these basics that the average human takes for granted. What's wrong with me? If this is you, nothing is wrong with you. You didn't get enough needs met when you were young. And good news, you get to be the person that helps you meet them now. Today, I stay hydrated automatically. I don't have to stop and pay attention and intend to drink. I've taught my body and my mind in my subconscious that we take care of ourselves by drinking a whole lot. I don't mean alcohol. I mean regular good for us fluids. Can you hear why this is a valuable practice? How it can change over time when you actually give yourself permission to pay attention to yourself at this level? I didn't get the kind of mother who helped me learn how to check in with myself and redirect myself. If I had, I would have been allowed to leave the room if my mother were angry or upset. If I had had the type of mother that knew how to help me learn how to check in with myself and pay attention to what mattered to me and what would keep me safe and healthy, grounded, secure, confident, then I would have been allowed to leave the room if my mother were angry or upset. I would have been raised learning how to honor my birthright to move away from bad energy and toward good, away from aggression, away from bullying, towards peace, towards reasonable safety and security, simply. But that's exactly what I didn't get. And exactly what I get to give myself now if I only figure this out, if I only give myself this attention and intention. Next question. Where in my body do I feel tension or tightness or strangeness might even apply to you? You might even feel a sense of numbness, which is a strange thing for me to say, right? How are we feeling numbness? But when you have a body, you will feel, and then you will feel a different sensation that implies numb. If you feel too tight, we can ask the other question also. Do you feel too loose in any areas? Here's a very oddly specific example. I grew up holding my stomach in. Why? I heard so many Southern women commenting on their own bodies negatively. The softness of a belly. Pinching. Judging fatness that wasn't even there. Being harsh with this body, critical. Judging it. I learned to hold my midsection too tight for fear of being shamed, mocked, made fun of, bullied. I lived in the deep, deep South in Louisiana where it is hot as hell. I never, and I mean never, I also wouldn't have been allowed, but I didn't when I was a teenager either. I never wore anything showing my belly in my teens and my 20s. I sure do now in my mid-40s. That's not about my body. That's because I've softened that messaging. I've softened and released the tension, the stress, the hypervigilance I felt about paying attention to the judgment that might come if I showed that part of my body. It took me years of going to a yoga class 4 to 6 times a week, hearing different teachers cue me to soften my belly as I inhaled. This was my first awareness that I held my body so tightly. And it helped me question, is this what I want my body, my belly to be doing 24/7 when I am awake and cognizant? Is that right for me? Is that right for any body? I listened to those yoga teachers. I inhaled and inhaled, gave myself the message it was safe and okay to soften, that I wanted my belly to soften. And it still took me years to actually be able to breathe into my belly. Can you see how my energies were channeled because of abuse? Because of roughness, of cruelty, of judgment. Because of what I soaked up from other women's critical body concepts, not even spoken towards my body. I'm spongy and always have been. I could have used kindness, softness, ease, or just neutrality. It would have been really great to just grow up not hearing those messages and letting a belly be a belly. I grew up thinking I should be able to control it all, from how my mother walked into a room and how she would treat me, to the tightness of my belly. That if I could just control it all, then maybe I wouldn't get hit. Maybe I wouldn't get screamed at. Maybe I wouldn't get belittled or shamed in front of others. I never had that conscious thought. But I sure grew up trying to control and manage everything around me. Everything other than me. Where in my body do I feel tightness or tension? This question gives permission to literally hold your body differently, to treat your body differently, to consider it differently, and bring an intention from wisdom instead of an accidental directive from trauma, from stress, from bullies, from hardship. How will you hold your body differently after bringing this attention to it today? Will you allow yourself to relate to your own body differently today, with more softness, more kindness, more neutrality? Here's the last question I want to pitch to you in terms of how to bring attention and intention into your self-care, into how you relate to your own self through this very hectic modern life that we all live. Here's the question. How can I be grateful for this body today? I have significant chronic pain. I'm 44. Hormonal changes from perimenopause are playing with my pain, y'all, and I don't like it. It's easy. It's so easy. It's cheap and easy for me to feel powerless, put upon, victimized by what seems entirely unfair and outside of my control. But going into victim mentality just because it's easy and cheap, it just digs the hole deeper. It makes me feel worse. It validates that everything sucks, and I don't need that validated for my inner child that had a rather sucky childhood. How can I be grateful for this body today is a question that sets our moral and emotional compass for the direction of good, of light, of what is right, and of all of us highly sensitive people having a wrung out sponge. Gratitude wrings out that sponge, y'all. Some days, the best I can do is acknowledge that my body breathes, and I'm grateful that it breathes. Sometimes the best I can do is be grateful that my heart pumps blood all throughout this body. I can be grateful that my mind and body decided to awaken again today. Some days, the most we might be able to come up with is that I'm grateful that my arms and legs move as I command them to. My arms, my legs, my body, my will takes me everywhere I go. My hands hold what I need. They open doors for me. If I go out into the sun, my hands will place a sun-blocking hat on my head. With great intention and attention, I want to use my glorious stubbornness towards gratitude. Don't ever let your stubbornness grab victim mentality, y'all. We can use our beautiful stubbornness towards gratitude, towards what will actually hold us up and help us out. That despite it all, this body shows up for me, and it always has to the best of its ability in any given moment. I stubbornly refuse to fight my own body. I stubbornly refuse to shame it, to be frustrated with it. How can I be grateful to this body today? Now, I don't like very much the idea of kicking the self-care can down the road, of waiting till whatever stressor is upon me to dissipate or a season to shift before I'm allowed to take care of myself. This is a sneaky trick our egos play on us, y'all, kicking that can of self-care down the road. The best example of this that I have for you is smokers, cigarette smokers, y'all. I grew up with heavy cigarette smokers. And I have heard more excuses about stopping smoking, right? It doesn't matter what the excuse is. It's a kicking the can down the road. Oh, I'll stop smoking after I get a new job. I'll stop smoking after I pay off this debt and it's not stressing me out. Or I'll stop smoking after the holidays because it will be stressful to host and I'll want to run outside for a quick little cigarette. There will always be a stressor sitting there as long as we are alive. And that stressor can sit there looking at us saying, are you going to change after me? You going to do something about this later? Until we turn around and we're a lifelong smoker. Or we get to our grave, never having attended to what we knew needed attention and intention if we are to be healthy people. Don't kick stress management down the road, y'all. Don't wait till the next big stressor passes. It's okay to take care of yourself now, today. If you had rough parents, a rough childhood, I implore you that this idea is its own healing balm, that you are worth it right now. You can stop and take a breath right now. Right now. Notice what happens in your mind and body when I say that and provide this moment. You can stop and pay attention to this body and soften it now. Why would you wait? Is that email really more important than taking a breath for this body? Is answering that next phone call? Is not making someone wait 15 seconds for you really a good enough reason to keep kicking your self-care can down the road? This is a hard truth, but it's a truth that can set us free. If I don't require myself to stop, pause, take a little meditation moment, take a little peace moment, take a self-care moment to take care of this body and this mind today in the present, if I don't require myself to pay attention to me and what I need, the truth is I'm allowing a similar energy to run my life like it ran in my childhood. As a child, the stressor was mostly my parents. And as an adult, it's adulting. It's taxes, it's bills, it's the DMV, it's mega responsibilities, it's the nonstop quality of adult modern life. if I don't require myself to give myself permission to slow down internally, if I don't require myself to value myself, to breathe, to let go of tension, to do something other than continuously plowing through, then I'm recreating the energies of stress, overwhelm, no escape, no reprieve, no options, never good enough, and had to endure in childhood. And then I'm creating an adulthood that I also have to endure. No wonder people feel desperate. No wonder people feel suicidal. I refuse to do that to myself and my inner child. I will not recreate crazy expectations that I just continue to plow through and plow through and plow through and plow through. I refuse. There's so much about modern life that keeps inviting us to get on that hamster wheel and never get off. Our politics, our governments, the way things work, the way they don't work in the world. So much dysfunction, so much abuse, so much manipulation, so much gaslighting. Don't let these sneaky forces trick your body into constant stress or hypervigilance like you may have had as a child. Be brave enough to stand up for yourself and say, stop. Take a breath. I am worth regulating this body. I am worth this kindness, and I am worth it no matter how stressful and crazy the external world gets. I will take care of myself no matter what the world tries to demand of me. We love fierce parents that would die in protection of their children, don't we? We love that trope. We love that archetype. Then why do we resist being that for ourselves? Well, maybe you, like me, were taught to pay attention outwardly, and maybe healing is a reclaiming of our birthright. We really do get to take care of ourselves. In recovery, we actually, whether we realize it consciously or not, we redefine love. What if self-love is actually found in how we stop and pay attention to ourselves? I think a lot about the message, the old cliche, stop and smell the roses. I think about it all the time. And I realize it's got nothing to do with roses, y'all. It's about slowing down this rat race of adulting. It's about becoming present and honoring this one precious life. Only you can love yourself enough to stop and smell the roses. Only you can love yourself enough to stop and ask yourself these questions. And they matter because you matter. And if you were raised having your birthright of mattering somehow taken away, then reclaim it, take it back. The questions I ask today are, what do you notice about yourself, about mind, body? Where in your body do you feel a tightness or a tension? And how can I be grateful for this body today? I am an emotional badass. You are an emotional badass. And together we are where Moxie meets mindful. I'll see you right here next time for a brand new episode. And I'll see y'all in the Patreon for commercial-free episodes. Light and love. Bye-bye.